If you're thinking about buying a home in Oregon, property taxes can be very, very tricky. In this video, I'm going to show you what you need to know, and I'm going to break mine down for you so you have an idea of what to expect. Stick around. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Seth Marchant, licensed real estate broker in the state of Oregon and Washington, or if you're new to this channel, living in Oregon, we show you what it's like to live here, specifically focusing around the Portland metropolitan area. We've got over 100 videos on the channel. We release new videos every single week. A lot of them are driving videos, introducing you to neighborhoods, drone footage, really giving you a feel for the area. And then we've got some other videos that are just purely educational, not the most exciting stuff, but it's important. And we're going to talk about property taxes today. So if you want to see more videos about what it's like to live in Oregon, make sure and subscribe to this channel, especially if you're thinking about buying a home in Oregon. You're going to want to know about property taxes, especially right now. People are really focused on the details of all of the fees and everything they're paying that goes into a real estate transaction, with interest rates being higher, with insurance consistently going up quite a bit every single year. A lot of people now are looking a little bit more closely at what they're paying in a real estate transaction, and property taxes can be very, very tricky in Oregon. There's 3 counties in the Portland metropolitan area, each with their own tax zones. These zones are determined by various taxing districts, such as school districts, city governments, fire departments, and other municipal services. And within each county, there are hundreds of property tax zones. And these zones are established based on overlapping boundaries of tax districts. So why so many zones? Well, there's a unique combination of, you've got city and county boundaries, school districts, you've also got city water, city sewer, and fire department. If you want to get a precise number, you can check with your local county assessor's office. Although in this video, I'm going to give you a really rough idea as to what to expect as far as what your property taxes are going to be. The first thing you need to know is Measure 50. Passed in 1997, Oregon voters passed something called Measure 50 that caps the assessed value growth at 3% annually. And part of here's what you need to know. The maximum assessed value, also known as MAV, Measure 50 established that as a basis for the property taxes. And the MAV was 90% of the real market value. So let's say a home is $1 million. They said, okay, the maximum assessed value, the MAV, is going to be 90% of that, which would be $900,000. And then that becomes your assessed value. Between the maximum assessed value and the real market value, you pay the lower of the two, which is your assessed value. And that cannot go up more than 3% every year unless improvements or additions are made to that property. Now, I've seen or at least heard of some assessors being pretty sleuthy when it comes to these things. So if you updated your kitchen, let's say you put your home on the market and it didn't sell, they might go into Zillow and look at some of those recent photos from your home and see that you updated your kitchen and make an assessment based on that improvement. If we're talking about new construction or some kind of major improvement, maybe you tear the house down to the studs, that property will be assessed at the real market value, which will then set the baseline for the max assessed value for future calculations. Now, it's important to know, because I know this is different in other states, the property does not reassess upon the sale of the home. It's only assessed once a year. It's not like California. I believe you guys get reassessed after the sale of a home. Now, due to Measure 50, you're going to have oftentimes a pretty big disparity between your assessed value and your real market value. I'll show you my property taxes here in just a moment, and you'll see what I mean. So this can be a benefit, and this is going to be definitely a benefit for somebody that's going to be holding real estate for a longer period of time, benefiting from that 3% cap year over year. But that actually is going to be a double-edged sword, and I'll show you here on my taxes what I mean in just a moment. I also want to point out, though, there are exemptions and deferrals as well. So exemptions can be for special groups, low-income groups, seniors, veterans, things like that. Due date is November 15th every year. You can get a little bit of a discount. Again, you'll see that on my taxes here in just a moment if you pay in full. You can also appeal your property taxes. So if you don't feel like it was assessed at the right value, you can make an appeal to the county assessor's office. Now, this is what a tax statement is going to look like. They look very similar for Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah County. If yours is green, that means the taxes are on you. It's up to you to pay for those. If they are yellow, that means that somebody is paying for most, if not all of them, on your behalf. So that would be your mortgage company, most people, particularly if your loan to value, in other words, the amount of money that you are borrowing based on the home value, if it's less than 50%, then you may just be paying your taxes on your own, in which your statement will be green every year. If it's more than 50%, then most likely your lender, the mortgage company, will want to hold your taxes in escrow. They'll charge you each month and set that money aside to pay that every single year, in which case your statement is likely going to be yellow. Also, I just mentioned a few moments ago, there are programs and exemptions for certain groups. So you may have, if you're in one of those categories, it might also be yellow for you. So looking to the left side here, values, they're going to show you last year versus this year. RMV, real market value land, real market value building. So those two are separated. They give you a total. And as you can see, the last year's value is actually a little bit higher than this year's real market value. However, the assessed value did go up from 574 to 592. So the property taxes, the total $11,000, $11,003. This year, $11,315. So went up just under 3%. 3% would be $330. So went up about $312 for the previous year. And you can see just below, if your assessed value has come in more than 3%, please reach out to our office at the number provided below. So that's what I mentioned, being earlier a double-edged sword. So despite the real market value, which is what you would sell your home for, you can think about the real market value like that. Real market value actually went down a little bit, but the assessed value actually went up. Now, this 3% rule really came into effect around 2020 because home values during lockdowns went up roughly 20% for most of the country. It might have been 18% in some places, 22% in others, but there wasn't a whole lot of deviation from somewhere around the orbit of 20%. So if you had a $500,000 house, that means that the next year, going up 20% in value, it was worth $100,000 more, so it would be worth $600,000. But you weren't having to pay property taxes on $600,000 instead of $500,000 again, because you were capped at that 3%, and you were paying on that assessed value rather than that real market value. So when property values are going up very high, that's when this law, this measure, is really benefiting people. But as you can see, the assessed value is still going to continue to go up. Now, should I appeal that? Can I appeal that? Yes, but if anybody's appealed this before, or if perhaps an assessor is watching by chance, if you want to weigh in, I don't believe that you're going to be able to successfully appeal that unless the assessed value is actually less than the real market value. So real market value can continue to go down. As you can see before, like I mentioned, you can find a pretty big gap in between the two. Anybody that bought a house before 2020 that experienced that 20% appreciation growth, which also happened in 2021, so we had about 40% between 2 years, is seeing that gap. Now just below you can see if you pay 100% in full, you get a very small discount. You can also pay 2/3 or 1/3, still get a little bit of a discount at 2/3, but not at 1/3. On the right side, you can see everything itemized there. The first line is current tax by district. So again, these numbers are going to be a little bit different for every house because we have hundreds and hundreds of these overlapping tax zones. I thought that's why it might be a little bit interesting for you to look at an actual property tax statement, because everybody's going to be a little bit different. Just below is education total, so you can see all the things, a lot of things going to education in the area that I live, and then just below that, general government total, and then you can see at the bottom, excluded from total. Those are additional taxes that were voted on by people that could not be included in this property tax. So you can see from this itemized list here, if you're going to just try and figure out what the exact property taxes are for any given property in the Portland metropolitan area, you're going to have to get all of those different lines in there based on the tax code. It's going to be very, very tricky. So I want to show you really just to give you a rough ballpark, it's going to be a lot easier actually just to look at effective tax rates. So effective tax rates, we have 36 counties in the state of Oregon. For Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas County, the effective tax rate, what I mean by that is how much taxes did people pay based on the real market value. So average home prices in Portland right now, let's call it right about $600,000, something just below that. So a $600,000 house on average, roughly, according to what people have actually paid, is going to be right under 1%. And just below that is going to be Washington and Clackamas County as well. I also want to show you a few other counties. If you're wondering where some of the lower taxes are, Deschutes County is Central Oregon. That's where Bend is. It's one of the top retirement places in the country. A lot of people have recently left Multnomah County, especially during lockdowns. They went down to Deschutes County, particularly a lot of the higher income earners. Lowest tax is going to be in Curry County. That's on the Oregon coast, the southernmost county on the Oregon coast. The town that a lot of people don't know or are familiar with is Brookings. Also a top retirement destination for people, especially people inside the state of Oregon. A lot of people coming from California moving to Brookings as well. Overall, the statewide average effective tax rate is 0.86%, which is slightly lower than the national effective tax rate, which is just over 1%. So unless you're coming from one of those states that does not have state income tax, where your property taxes might be higher, regardless of where you're coming from in the country, you're probably going to find that Oregon is going to be very similar to where you are coming from. On the note of states that do not have state income tax, just across the river, just across the Columbia River, across the border from Oregon is Washington, in which they do not have state income tax. That is made up by charging people for a sales tax. Oregon is one of the few states, I think maybe one of just two states, that does not have sales tax. So kind of a unique situation with the Oregon-Washington border. I've lived here my whole life. I don't know anybody really, but I've heard about people doing this. Living in Washington where they do not pay a state income tax, but then shopping in Oregon, driving over the bridge over the river to shop in Oregon where they will not pay that sales tax. I don't think we see too many people doing that because it is a little bit of a hassle to do so. There are a few other ways to get around that too, although none that I would recommend to you, but I'll since I'm privy to it, I'll share it with you. Another way you could go about it is if you owned two homes, own one home in Washington, say Vancouver, Washington, then own one home in Portland, Oregon. You list your Washington home as your primary dwelling, in which you will not pay state income taxes, but you actually spend your time at your Portland home, in which it'll be easier for you to be able to shop in Oregon. You don't have to drive across the river. Now, there's probably a lot of reasons why you shouldn't do that. One I can think of is if you do have a loan on that home, the mortgage company always wants to know what you're using that home for. They want to know if it's your primary dwelling or if it's an investment property. There's a lot of different reasons why they want to know that. So if you do have a home, let's say that's in Washington, that you're telling the mortgage company, that's my primary dwelling, that's where I live, but you don't actually live there, you're living in Portland like I just mentioned, if they find out about that, they could cancel the loan and tell you that you're going to have to pay the balance of the loan or you'll go into foreclosure. In other words, it's called pulling the note, and most people are not going to be able to pay the balance of their mortgage if they were told to, just on a given notice. So for that reason, and probably some others, it's probably not advisable to do that, but I have heard of people doing that. Now, if you do have more questions about property taxes, moving to Oregon or Washington, effective tax rate across the river in Vancouver isn't going to be a whole lot different than Oregon. So you're not going to save too much by going there. Like I said, you've got that little hack if somebody wants to try and do that. But any other questions that you have about moving to the Portland metropolitan area, again, I'm a licensed real estate broker in both states. I invite you to call, text, email, however you want to get in touch. You can find all the contact information of the description of this video just below. You can also hit that QR code if you're watching from TV. That'll take you to our website where you can find more information there. And of course, make sure and subscribe to this video. This channel is going to show you exactly what it's like to live in Oregon, and we're going to continue to keep giving you more and more content all the time. So if this video helped you, give me a thumbs up. Lets me know I'm doing a good job. And of course, feel free to weigh in with your comments. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. If you're watching from out of state, how do these numbers, how do some of these rates that we've talked about, how does this compare to where you're from? Is it higher or is it lower? Anything else you want to weigh in the comments, feel free. And until next time, take care, everyone.